says General William Boykin, retired, told True News Daily today that the U.S. economy of the United States is just about the break and collapse. And when the dam gives way, severe food shortages and pervasive violence throughout America will warrant, in his opinion, an executive declaration of martial law. For those in the know, we knew this was going to come, and I am not surprised to hear something like this. Quote, I'll be very honest with you. The situation in America could be such that martial law is actually warranted, and that situation, in my view, could occur if we had an economic collapse, said Boykin, a former CIA deputy director of special activities. Quote, the dam is just about to break on our economy. And I think when it does, there's going to be a major disruption of the disruption of food. And he added, and I think what you'll see particularly in the inner cities is you will see riots, civil unrest that ultimately might justify martial law. Through the U.S., or should I say, though the U.S. is the world's largest exporter of agriculture, in the case of a currency collapse, producers will withhold shipments to retailers and consumers unable to pay in a currency other than U.S. dollars. For a time, barter will take the place of currency for those living in rural areas. But for the majority of Americans living in cities and adjacent suburbs, food shortages can emerge within 24 hours. Quote, I think those people that are not in the major cities are going to be far better off. But it could actually justify martial law, Boykin continued. And I'm praying that we will not see this kind of collapse. We won't see a disruption of food in America. That's probably the single biggest problem. Recommendations by prepper organizations and a handful of governments, as is the case in Utah and some municipalities, to include storing enough non-perishable foods to last a month to 90 days, 3 months, have become commonplace during the 4-year-long economic recession. As the history of currency collapses throughout the world demonstrate that for a meaningful period of time, food will not be available at grocery stores, food pantries, and other collective emergency food supplies. Recent examples of food shortages due to a rapid currency devaluation include Argentina in 2002, Cuba following the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989, and in Zimbabwe during its currency collapse in the late 2000s. Although the U.S. is not expected to match Zimbabwe in intensity and duration of inflation, 89 sextillion% in 2008, all nations undergo a period of profound dislocation of commerce during a currency devaluation, which may range from as little as several weeks to several months. At that time, food becomes the king of all commodities, while government reestablishes a new workable currency to reestablish normal commerce once again. If people can eat, they can survive for some period of time while we get through the economic crisis and reestablish currency and systems and all that, said Boykin. But if they can't eat, you're going to fight. And that's my big concern. From his intelligence, as well as from numerous publicly available anecdotal testimonies and leaked government documents, the U.S. military has been preparing with local law enforcement for a coming crisis. Boykin strongly advises the public to make preparations for the most likely scenario of a coming breakdown of the food distribution channels in America during a dollar collapse. Quote, for me, I have 3 months of food stored. I have a bunch of other essentials that I have stored in my home, he said. And my wife and I are preparing for this. Quote, not a lot of people call us, foolish for that kind of attitude, he says. But I would tell you that I'm not going to be unprepared. I think people should be prepared now for some disruption. This economic collapse is a very strong possibility. We need to get ready for it and we need to be thinking through and developing plans for how we're going to react to it. That's a pretty profound article.
It is.
Coming from a deputy director of the CIA. I mean, this is a guy who would know.
Yes.
The intricacies of what's going on.
And the thing is that, even when I tell, and I mean, I really don't talk to my family a lot because they don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about politics. They don't want to talk about the economy.
Yeah.
And, and when I tell them that the feed prices are going up, buy the meat right now while it's cheap, freeze it, can it, do whatever it is you need to do to preserve it.
Right.
No response whatsoever from these people.
There's a few reasons for that. One is it's better to ignore things. Maybe they'll go away. And a lot of people suffer from depression because they know they have to do something in their life to change something that they don't like, but they ignore it, or they drown it in drugs or alcohol or something.
Right.
Some sort of food, maybe. They eat too much, smoke too much, drink too much, whatever. And
that sums it up.
Hoping that by ignoring it, it'll go away. Now, there's another a lot of other people that they just can't look at things that are traumatic. So they ignore it because psychologically it makes them freeze, and it makes them do absolutely nothing. Because it's scary, because it involves doing something and being responsible for themselves, and they really just don't know what to do. There's another group of people that believe that, the United States has gone and gotten themselves into a pickle many times, and we've always been able to bounce back.
Right.
And our leaders will take care of this. There are smart people, smarter than us, that are watching the store, and they won't let this happen. And so, there's this belief that, somebody's out there is going to save your ass.
Right.
All you have to do is look at Katrina and see what happens when you rely too much, or you even those people were warned in Katrina that a major hurricane is headed their way.
Right.
And this was based on fact. This was based on
the
weather models and the tracking system and all sorts of things. They said it could really be bad, cause a lot of flooding, and people said, we'll just, we've always had storms in the past,
right?
And we've gotten through it.
This is the thing, though, is that when your house goes through that many storms, it starts getting moved off the foundation.
Well,
and it only takes one more before the whole house falls down, and that's where we're at.
And nothing has ever hit those levees the way it did, and caused the devastation that it did. And then they thought that government was going to be there immediately to help them, and the response was also very slow from government.
Right.
So this notion that the cavalry is on its way, they were very disappointed. There's a lot of people that died.
Well, they were on
Katrina.
their way. They were just stopped by the waters.
That's kind of what they were thinking was going to happen, though, right?
Yeah.
But this is a really profound article. I recommend you read it again. It's an ETF Daily at a True News Radio. Look up True News Radio. Listen to that interview. And I have another one that is pretty also eye-opening, and this is out of beaconequity.com. So the title of the article is called "We Are Preparing for Massive Civil War," says DHS informant, Department of Homeland Security. In a riveting interview Wednesday, private investigator Doug Hagman, Hagmann, said high-level reliable sources told him the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is preparing for massive civil war in America. Folks, we're getting ready for one massive economic collapse, Hagman told the host. We have problems. The federal government is preparing for civil uprising. And so every time you hear about troop movements, every time you hear about movements of military equipment, the militarization of the police, the buying of the ammunition, all of this, the DHS, are preparing for massive uprisings. Hageman goes on to say that his source tells him the concerns of the DHS stem from the collapse of the U.S. dollar and hyperinflation. A collapse in the value of the world's primary reserve currency implies to a nation of 311 million Americans, who for the significant portion of the population is armed. Okay? Uprisings in Greece is indeed a problem, but an uprising of armed Americans becomes a matter of serious national security. A point addressed in a recent report by the Pentagon and highlighted as a vulnerability and threat to the U.S. during war game exercises at the Department of Defense last year. According to one of the DoD's war game participants, Jim Rickards, author of Currency Wars, The Making of the Next Global Crisis, through his sources, Hageman confirmed Rickards' ongoing thesis of a fear of a U.S. dollar collapse at the hands of the Chinese, U.S. Treasury bond holders of approximately $1 trillion, and possibly the Russians, threatening to launch a gold-backed ruble as an attractive alternative to the U.S. dollar. In retaliation for aggressive U.S. foreign policy initiatives against China and Russia, strategic allies Iran and Syria. The one source that we have, I've known since 1979, Hageman continued. He started out as a patrol officer, and currently he is now working for a federal agency under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security. He's in a position to know what policies are being initiated, what policies are being planned at this point, and he's telling us right now, look, what you're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. We are preparing, we meaning the government, we are preparing for massive civil war in this country. There's no hyperbole here. He added, echoing Trends Research Institute founder Gerald Celente's forecast of last year. Celente expects a collapse of the U.S. dollar and riots in America sometime this year. Since Celente's Civil War prediction of last year, Executive Order NDAA and National Defense Resource Preparedness were signed into law by President Barack Obama, which are both politically damaging actions taken by a sitting president. And most recently, requests made by the DHS for the procurement of 450 million rounds of hollow point ammunition only fuel speculation of an upcoming tragic event expected on American soil. These major events, as shocking to the American people as they are, have taken place during an election year, escalating preparatory activities by the executive branch and DHS throughout the last decade. For the Patriot Act, to countless executive orders drafted to suspend or strip American civil liberties, are just the beginning of the nightmare to come, Hageman said. He added, it's going to get so much worse towards the election, and I'm not even sure we're going to have an election in this country. It's going to be that bad. And this, as well, is coming from my sources. But one source in particular said, look, you don't understand how bad it is. This stuff is real. These people, the Department of Homeland Security, they are ready to fight the American people. The host asked Hageman, who does the DHS expect to fight in particular? Another North versus South, the Yankees against the Confederates? Hageman stated the situation is far worse than a struggle between any two factions within the United States. It's an anticipated nationwide emergency event centered on the nation's currency. What they, the DHS, are expecting, and again, this is according to my sources, what they're expecting is the unsustainability of the American dollar. Hageman said, and we know for a fact that we can no longer service our debt. There's going to be a period of hyperinflation. The dollar will be worthless. The economic collapse will be so severe, people won't be ready for this.